Jack Smith's Deposition Part 10 Knowledge of Falsity and the Ellipse Rally. Welcome to Law and Society. Please remember to subscribe. What I'm doing here is reading you excerpts from Jack Smith's deposition at the House Judiciary Committee about Donald Trump's insurrection on January 6, 2021 and his fake elector scheme. And the reason why I'm doing it is because we need to focus on the truth and make sure that Donald Trump and his pardoned insurrectionists who are out on the streets for the first time in 5 years since the insurrection and the fake elector scheme, that what they are going to be peddling has to be countered overwhelmingly by the truth. And this is my contribution to that endeavor. So please remember to subscribe and let's dive in. I'm going to read the questions out and then read you Jack Smith's answers. Question. One of the bigger parts of your report, and which you've talked about here today, comes down to knowledge. Mr. Trump's knowledge that he had lost the election. I know you've talked about it at various stages of today, but I would just like a pretty clear answer, if you don't mind, about what evidence did you collect about Mr. Trump's knowledge that he had indeed lost the election of 2020. Smith, okay, well, there are two types of knowledge. One that he lost the election, and another that the things he was saying was false. The fraud claims were, in fact, false. It's the same sort of bucket of evidence that he was repeatedly told by people that the very fraud claims that would change the outcome were not true. As you may remember, when he was told by his campaign team, in essence, that if you can't win Arizona, you can't win the election, and then he lost Arizona, he changed out that team and went with Giuliani and his group. He also had statements from other individuals. I believe it was General Mark Milley who said he was going to leave this for the next guy. There was another staffer who overheard him saying something to the effect of, "You keep fighting regardless of whether you won or lost." Things of that nature, which were corroborative of the other. The very strong evidence of things he was saying about these election claims were not true. Question. The second part was that Mr. Trump knew that his claims were false. And in the report you say Mr. Trump knowingly made false claims. So I'm assuming that talked about the false claims that he made after he knew that he had lost the election. Can you describe or summarize some of these false claims he made to the American public after he knew he had lost the election? Smith, sure. These would be false claims about dead voters. It would be false claims about underage voters. It would be false claims about illegal alien voters. The false claims were generally, as a general matter, about urban centers where he had lost the vote in a particular state, and that was otherwise close by a lot. And yes, again, these were claims that were rebutted by people around him who knew that they were false, and in many cases told him they were false. Question by Representative Lofgren. The president gave a speech on the rally, and we received testimony of a couple of things. That his supporters were leaving their weapons outside the mags because they wouldn't go through. And also that at some point Mr. Trump said, "Let them through anyhow because they're not going to hurt me." It was subsequent to that knowledge that some of these supporters were armed that he called on them to go to the Capitol. Was that set of facts subject to your investigation and review? Smith, I recall what you're talking about. I remember we interviewed different people who were near, and we interviewed people who were near or around President Trump in that time period during the Ellipse speech. And on that point, there were different recollections and different points of view. Some people said what you said, other people had more innocuous explanations about why people stayed outside the mags. Clearly, people did stay outside the mags. You see that in the video of the crowd. So I do recall that. And as I said, I remember different people hearing different parts of that and having different perspectives on it. Question: Metropolitan Police as well as Secret Service identified a number of people who were armed along the route, some of them in trees. Did you get information about that? Smith: I don't recall. I do recall that there were people who certainly had weapons at the Capitol. That I recall with certainty. And there were people who used weapons, whether they be poles or sticks or other weapons against police officers. I know there was one officer who they took his gun. And so the use of weapons against members of law enforcement, it was outrageous. But it figured heavily in what happened at the Capitol that day. Question: Did President Trump ever acknowledge that he knew that he had actually lost the election to President Biden? Smith: Yes. So this paragraph references different statements that he made in the presence of other people. One is that it doesn't matter if you've won or lost the election, you still fight like hell. And then the other was, can you believe I lost to this effing guy, referring to Joe Biden? So if this would have gone to trial, question. So if this would have gone to trial and using your years of experience being prosecutor and trial attorney, how would you have argued this admission of Mr. Trump? Or how could you? What's a way you could have argued this admission from Mr. Trump to a jury? Smith: Well, I saw these admissions as corroborative of the larger case. We would have presented what I viewed as a very strong witnesses from each state to explain how the elections occurred in that state and why the events, the outcomes were trustworthy, and debunking various fraud claims that President Trump made. We would present the false claims that he made repeatedly, interspersed with debunkings to him, or other evidence that showed they weren't true, and that evidence got to him. This sort of evidence would corroborate, but it would sort of be the cherry on top, if you will. The evidence that I felt was most powerful was the evidence that came from people in his own party who, as I said earlier, put country before party and were willing to tell the truth about truth to him, even though it could mean trouble for them. I think witnesses like that, in my experience, would be very powerful witnesses in front of a jury. And this sort of evidence that you're pointing here would be extra. But I think those other evidence, those other witnesses would be very strong proof. Question: in your experience with these types of witnesses, I'm assuming individuals from the same party as Mr. Trump pushing back on him on his assertions of voter fraud and various other claims, why would that, in your opinion, been powerful to present to a jury? Smith: well, I think someone who puts country before party, I think my understanding of people, of jurors, that people appreciate that. I know I certainly do. The other part about that is the reality of when people speak out against their political party, there can be costs. And when people are willing to pay those costs because they believe in something, because they are going to tell the truth, I think people get that. And I think the witnesses I'm talking about, if I had to cross-examine them and make them not look credible, that would be very hard. I think that would be a very hard assignment. So with that said, we have come to the 10th episode, end of the 10th episode of Jack Smith's Depositions. Please come back for more. There will be a few more. I'm not entirely sure how many more. And we will remember exactly what happened on January 6th, before and after, from Jack Smith himself. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll talk to you soon.